issue. Okay, so in that vein, I would introduce our incumbent state senator, Republican Fred Akshar.
Wonderful job. Jennifer, you're a breath of fresh air for Broome County and Binghamton. To the Marabito family, thank you very much, and I always thank my opponent. I think that these conversations are great, that people deserve an opportunity to hear us talk about issues. Just a little bit by way of my background. I spent the last 15 years of my life in law enforcement. I've had a blessed career. I cut my teeth really in the detective bureau. I did spend some time undercover. I'm sure you saw a picture of me with long hair and a beard last year. That was really me. I promoted within that unit. The task force does remarkable work in terms of trying to eradicate narcotics from our community. Became the captain of the law enforcement division. I went away to the FBI Academy in Quantico, and when I decided to run for the Senate, I was the undersheriff, albeit for a very brief time. I tell you about that not to boast, but I truly believe that my time in law enforcement has given me a unique perspective in serving this community, because I spent that time in the community, at the community level, and I think that that is incredibly important. You see, folks, I don't agree with a top-down approach. I agree with a bottom-up approach. That's how I think that we are going to be successful. So in everything that my administration does, the team and I, we take a bottom-up approach, whether that be dealing with the heroin issue that's plaguing not only the SD52, but the state, quite frankly, and the nation, and as well as dealing with the business issues. Last year, I pledged to everybody in this room and the people of the 52nd Senate District that I was going to be accessible and approachable. And I've kept my word. We have traveled this district on a daily basis. I spend very little time in my office. We've traveled to every corner of this district. We have met with hundreds of business owners, thousands of loving families, and we've listened to them. Because I truly believe that if we are going to be successful as a community, it is incumbent upon elected leaders to not spend time in their office, but to continue to travel and listen to the people. That's where we come up with real solutions to the issues that are plaguing our communities. Let me just talk about a little bit about our accomplishments. It was said last year that I would never get anything accomplished being a freshman, and it would be incredibly hard to walk in the shoes of Senator Lewis. But I pledged to the people that I was going to be a loud and energetic voice. And I pledged to the people of this district that I was going to go to work on day one. And we did that. And I'm pleased at the accomplishments in such a short period of time, whether it be passing bipartisan reforms to deal with the heroin issue. And I applaud my colleagues in the Assembly, because at the end of the day, everybody laid their political differences aside, and we achieved true reforms, whether that be tearing down barriers for access to treatment, whether that be holding doctors accountable and for their overprescribing practices, whether it be ensuring that prior approvals weren't needed for medical assisted treatment, or getting in the door for detox or for inpatient care. We passed the largest middle-class tax cut in the last 70 years. What does that do? It puts money back in the pockets of the taxpayer where it belongs. We achieved true parity. Would you believe that we were having discussions about only funding the MTA last year and not the DOT? That actually made me sick. Our issues, our infrastructure issues, are just as important as downstate. And folks, that's really a very serious issue. Upstate values are a little bit different than downstate values. And I would respectfully offer that a balance in government is very, very important. Because if there is no balance in government, then it becomes all about downstate and nothing about upstate. And that's a problem. So long as you'll have me in the New York State Senate, I'm going to continue to advocate for upstate values and ensure that upstate gets its fair share and New York City doesn't tower over us. I too would respectfully ask everybody in this room for your support on November 8th. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Akshar. Now to the challenger, Democrat Sharon Ball.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you everyone for being here, and thank you to the Chamber. For some of you, you may have known me in my previous life, but for those who don't, let me tell you a little bit about myself. Again, my name is Sharon Ball. I've lived in Whitney Point for 13 years. I moved there from the Washington, D.C. area with my husband, J.W. Johnston, who is a photographer and who grew up in Whitney Point. We live in his family home. We chose this community deliberately, intentionally, on purpose, and I love it here. We were previously in broadcast journalism. We met at a newsroom in Virginia in 1984. And the thing that I think I want to say about that is I've spent 30 years in broadcast journalism. And one of the things, I was very proud of my work. I spent 15 years at National Public Radio in Washington, D.C. But the thing that happens with broadcast journalism is that there's a space between you and your community, a little distance. You have to keep your distance in order to remain objective. And at this point in my life, at this point in our lives, we wanted to be part of the community. We wanted to be engaged and involved. And here in the Southern Tier, in Whitney Point, we have been able to do that. I own an LLC, and for 5 years I operated a music and cultural center in Whitney Point while I was executive director of the Broome County Arts Council. I was exhausted. And I want to say that during my 11 years at the Broome County Arts Council, I got to know people not just in Broome County, but throughout this area. And I just want to compliment you on the resilience of the people here and the way you've allowed me to participate and offer my gifts and talents, and the way you've let me serve. And that's really one of the reasons that I decided to step up and run for this office, to challenge Mr. Akshar here. The point that really propelled me into this race was the realization that corruption in Albany is bipartisan. It doesn't belong to one party or another. And that corruption wastes our taxpayer dollars, and it makes me wonder how much money would be available to support small businesses, to bring down taxes, if we could eliminate some of that darkness where money seems to disappear. I want to, and my upset about that now, my concern about that is what propelled me into this race. And I got tired of hearing about economic development discussed as partisan. Economic development for the Southern Tier needs to be about all of us. It really does, because it affects all of us when it doesn't work. The current economic development scandal is the latest. When I arrived here in 2003, the scandal was about the empire zones and the jobs that they had promised, the millions that had been spent on tax breaks, and the jobs that did not materialize. That was the scandal when I arrived. That was the Pataki administration. So I've come to the conclusion that this is a bipartisan concern, and that the problem is systemic. The problem of corruption is systemic, and that we all need to do something about paying attention to that. The foundation needs to be raised and cleaned. And from that, from a cleaner foundation, we get a better product, we get better service from our government. Do you think of government as service? Do you think of your politicians as public servants? So many times going around this district as a candidate, I have encountered people who don't vote because they say it doesn't matter, because that money will just go into a big black hole anyway. I'm not going to get what I want or need anyway. That is what corruption does to a community. It removes hope. It removes possibility. People with solutions and creativity and the possibility of bringing forth gifts and talents that we may not even see, hold back. Keep them to themselves because they think they can't be heard. They think there's no point. Trust. When we don't trust our government doesn't work. And when our government doesn't work, we must make it work. And I'm running because I have a record of integrity. I have a record of fairness. You can ask people who didn't really appreciate that. They wanted special, but what they got was fair. And I have a record of getting things done and working with people who don't necessarily look like me, agree with me, but we find common ground. We have places where we have common interests.
Ms.
And
Ball,
that's where solutions are found.
Thank you very much, Ms. Ball.